I'd like to tell you just a little bit about our presenter today. We're very lucky to have Dr. Diane Petrella here. She, as many of you know, is Associate Professor of Piano and Piano Pedagogy and Chair of the Keyboard Studies Division at UMKC, the Conservatory of Music, my alma mater. She, with her husband, has performed as the Petrella Ensemble all over the world. She's written a book with him. She has written for magazines such as the American Music Teacher. She's presented at conferences all over, including the last MTNA conference, which I was there. It was a great presentation. She performs. She's got degrees. She's very worthy. We're very lucky. So I'm very interested in hearing her strategies for secure, successful performance, and I'm sure you are too. Please help me welcome Dr.
That's probably the best introduction I have ever.
Yeah!
Thank you, Melanie. Just fabulous. Before I start, I did want to introduce, there was all these people lurking in the back, and I wanted to tell you why they are here. This year, I am teaching 2 semesters of graduate level pedagogy classes at the conservatory. These classes are required of our master's and doctoral students in piano performance. Most of them have already taken a 2-semester sequence of piano pedagogy at the undergraduate level. So we try to design courses that were just taking this to the next level. So in the fall, I taught group piano pedagogy, which is designed to teach them how to teach group piano at the university level. Right? And this semester, I'm teaching what we call advanced piano pedagogy, and the whole focus of the course is teaching them how to teach piano at the university level. Most of them have aspirations of teaching at a university someday. So in the class, we talk about everything from how to teach advanced literature and a survey of the literature, a history of piano pedagogy, but we also talk about writing a resume, writing a cover letter, interviewing for a job, leading a search committee, and also the components of a college teaching job, which a lot of them think is just going to involve teaching private piano to brilliant students. But instead, what I tell them is all the things that we do in terms of service to the community and research and activity, and also teaching and the various aspects of it. So I always try to get them out when I'm teaching this class to a local music teachers group, because I think connections with our local music teachers are so essential to our success at a university. And a lot of them will have to give, or will be able to give, presentations like this to local music teachers groups. And I think it's so important that they come out, that they meet you, that they see the kinds of presentations that you're interested in. A couple years ago, I kind of surprised Matt Edwards and popped in to have his presentation to KCMTA with 10 doctoral students. I think he was not happy with me. But I figured this semester I would just bring them along with me when Melanie invited me to come speak today. So that's why they're all back there. I think if you turn around and wave, these are all master's and doctoral students in piano, and they're a wonderful group of students, and they've been very interactive. It's one of the best classes I think I've ever taught. So I'm thrilled to have them here, and I hope that they will mix and mingle and talk with you after we're done. But I didn't want you to think I was just popping in with a group of crazy people. When Melanie invited me to come talk to your group, I actually gave her about 7 or 8 topics and said, go ahead and pick. I often work with music teachers groups where they just say, can you talk about this? And they give me a specific topic to talk about. And this particular topic was actually done by request from a group when I was teaching in Michigan. They asked for how do you get students to perform well, right? How do you learn to perform well and play well in front of other people reliably? So I developed this presentation kind of in reaction to a request from the teachers group. And I'd like to almost start with a question. Right? What do you think we're going to talk about? I mean, when somebody says they're going to give a presentation on strategies for secure and successful performance, what are the things that we're going to address?
Preparation.
How do we prepare? What else?
Memorization.
Good. Memorization. Anything else? Is that it?
Performance etiquette.
Yeah, performance etiquette and performance
anxiety.
I find that a lot of people have that concept that what I'm really going to get up here and talk about is how to overcome performance anxiety. I guess I got to pay attention to my... There we go. Not in sync today, right? But a lot of teachers expect me to come up here and talk about performance anxiety. We focus on that we think that what is affecting our students' ability to perform well is their ability to overcome anxiety. But I actually think that you hit the nail on the head, that we neglect to discuss where the confidence to perform well actually comes from, and that's in our own preparation, right? And how we go about learning and preparing a piece of music. So techniques like visualization and relaxation, eating bananas, all the things that we do before we go on stage, they're relevant, right? But we often don't address this particular topic from where it really starts, which is from the very first time we actually pick up a piece of music and look at it as a pianist, and how are we going to learn this piece. So I'm going to say that our confidence on stage is gradually built from the way that we learn, memorize, and polish our repertoire. Relaxation techniques can help us with stage fright. Right? We all deal with some elements of stage fright and that kind of anxiety. So that can help, but they're much more effective when they are preempted with practice that is focused on a secure and successful performance. Right? Overcoming nerves can't help us if we don't really know the music. Right? It can help us to get control in the moment, but it's not going to help us along the way. So I like to start this little game called Choose a Quote. Okay? So my first quote is, practice is doing something over and over again until you get it right. I love Melody. She's shaking her head. No. Right? The other quote is, practice is doing something right over and over again. Right? So this is what we're aiming for. Right? How many of you think our students would have nodded yes vigorously to the first one? Right? My main pre-collegiate students right now are my own 5 children. Right? And my oldest is the worst. Right? He will play it and get it right, and then we're ready to move on. But he neglects the fact that he played it 3 times wrong because he won't slow down, he won't listen to his mom, right? And he's played it wrong 3 times, and now he finally gets it right, and he's ready to move on, okay? So what I'm trying to ingrain in them is we're going to get this right, and then we're going to keep doing it right, because what we do over and over again becomes a habit, and then it's easy to duplicate, right? So this subtle difference is really what I think is the key to establishing a sound practice routine, is understanding that our goal is to get it right. So we're going to ensure that our piece is learned efficiently, effectively, and so thoroughly that the chances of successful performance are greatly increased, right? Now I've got my slide up here that says muscle memory. Right? A lot of us have come to this idea that muscle memory is bad. Right? But muscle memory is actually a very good thing and is one of our biggest allies in performance. It's a good thing when we understand how it works and how to develop it and how to let it help us instead of hurting us, right? So what I like this quote here, I found this somewhere, I can't attribute it to the right person right now, but basically muscles will readily duplicate tasks that they have been properly and consistently trained to perform. Right? They will do it. To take advantage of muscle memory, right, we have to play the right notes. We have to play the right rhythm. And we have to play the right fingering. Every single time that we play something. Right? Every time that we play a piece with 100% accuracy of notes, pitch, and rhythm, the practicing is moving us towards our goal of an accurate and clean performance. Every time I play a piece without that level of accuracy, it moves me away from my goal. Right? I like to call this negative practicing. Right? Have you ever had a student that you give them a piece of music and you say, okay, go and learn these first 16 measures and come back next week and show me what you've done. And they come back and they haven't paid any attention to the fingering, they've got wrong notes, they haven't counted out the rhythm, it's just totally wrong. Right? They have actually moved away from the goal. Right? They would have been better off not practicing at all. You agree?
I don't know. Do you want to say that? I don't know.
But it's true. I mean, if I say to a student, this is where our goal is. This is a 100% accurate performance. And I started here with nothing. You've actually moved here because we all know that what they've done is they've taught their hands the wrong thing. And isn't it harder to unlearn something than to learn it right in the first place? So they've gone backwards. Right? And that illustration often makes an impact on students. That if you can just say, you've actually moved away. You would have been better off sitting on your butt, playing your video games in the kitchen, instead of sitting down at the piano because you've moved away from the goal, right? So that's the kind of thing I try to tell them. I don't know if it's true. Have you heard this quote? For every time we play a passage wrong, we have to play it correctly 17 times to retrain the muscles to do the correct execution of the passage. Now, I'm not sure the 17 is that scientific, but you all know that it's true, that's why we have these mistakes we make over and over and over again, because we made the mistake, and now our hands, these muscles, think that's the right thing to do, and it's not, right? But they don't know that muscles are not very bright, right? They only do what we tell them to do, right? We always have students saying this particular.
I love it.
This always happens. Why does this always happen to me? And they get up there and they play, and you're like, well, that's because that's what you always do. Right? Have you ever had a student play a passage for you, and they're playing along, and they play it once wrong, and then they automatically go right back and they play it again right? Right? So they get to the point, they play it wrong, they play it right. Some of them don't even realize they're doing it. And that's because the muscles think that's how it goes, right? Because that's what they did in practice, right? They sat there, they ran up the scale, they missed the F sharp, they went back and started again and played it. In my hand, it's like, this is what we do when we get here, right? Because I've taught the muscles to do that particular passage, and they're not smart enough to distinguish between what was right and what was wrong. They're only doing what I repeatedly did. Right? And so that illustration, when they say that, this is what I always say, well, it always happens because that's what you always do, right? Pianists often miss opportunities with muscle memory, right? Because they're not training their muscles, or they're giving them contradictory directions in the early stages of learning. Does that make sense? So because they have not started with this kind of almost this fear of doing it wrong, they're not getting the full benefit of the muscle memory, right? And so if we teach students that this muscle memory is your friend, if you use it the right way, right, hopefully you can get them to have a more thoughtful approach. I know this is not always easy with a 9-year-old boy. I have lots of those, right? But to elaborate this point, let's think about how we typically approach a piece of new repertoire, right? So even just yourself, you've got a piece of music that you're going to learn. What is the first thing you do?
Fingering.
You write your fingering in, okay? Is that true? You're like my students, they always give me the answer they
No,
think
that's what
I
I
want.
always do. I mean, I try to work on getting a good fingering for the passage, is maybe a better way to say it.
Yeah, we want to make sure that the fingering is important, and you can see how that connects to the muscle memory. What's something else we do when we open up that brand new piece that we're just getting ready to learn?
You just want to get in there.
signature.
Helen's being real. Which is, most of us just sit down and play through it, don't we? Don't you?
Yeah.
Can we resist the urge? Don't you think that's what our students do too?
Of course.
They sit down and they try to play, right? What's the problem with this?
They're not as good as sight readers as we are.
Inevitably, and now some of us are monster readers. I am not one of those people, right? So inevitably what happens? Right, we make mistakes, right? And so what we have done is there's almost no way we're gonna play this with 100% accuracy, right? So we've gone through it already, and we've started the process off by making mistakes in notes, fingering, rhythm, all the things that we just said we didn't want to do, right? And that's how most of us start, that's how most of our students start, right? And they go through it and they think that just by repetition, we're gonna catch some more of those mistakes and it's gonna get better just by doing it more, right? And I think there's some things that we do as teachers that kind of encourage that behavior. When we tell students, okay, go home and play this page 10 times, right? Repetition is an important part of learning an instrument, but if it's not directed or focused appropriately, is it always going to come up with good results? Right? So we have to be careful in just insisting on repetition. Right? It's not just repetition, it's did we do it right? Right? So we want to avoid this kind of negative practice by telling our students we're not going to learn the piece of music by just plowing through it and going through it over and over again, even though that's much more fun, isn't it? Yeah, we even think that. Yeah, again, my quote about not practicing it all. But really, if we're going to take advantage of the muscle memory in the early stages of learning, I try to encourage students to be very systematic. And of course, immediately we think, oh, they're not going to want to do this, right? But most students actually thrive when they're given very specific direction in terms of how to practice. When we just say to somebody, go downstairs and practice for 30 minutes, right, which I know a lot of parents who do that, they'll put the kid down at the piano and say, go practice for 30 minutes, and I think, when I tell my students at home how to practice, whether they're my kids or my other private students, it's never an amount of time. It's never an amount of repetition unless it's a very specific direction with repetition. Now, what I'm really telling them is a very specific goal. I want you to sit down and learn this particular passage at this particular speed, counting out loud, hands separate, practice it this way, that I'm giving them specific directions so that they're not just sitting there for an undeterminate or a specific amount of time, that they're trying to accomplish specific goals that are results-based, right? So I'm giving very specific goals. So if I tell them, okay, I want you to go learn this, and I want you to make sure it is always right. It's always right. We're not going to play it wrong. So from the very beginning, we're going to practice this with 100% accuracy, right? For most students, this is best accomplished by taking small sections, right? I often tell them that if you've played the whole piece, do you even remember what you had a hard time with in the first line? Right? So a small section, a single line, 4 measures, depending on the piece, right? Taking that section and being systematic. So I'll tell them we're going to play the right hand 4 times in a row, counting out loud with the right fingering, right? And then I'm telling you, you're going to play the left hand first. I want you to block through the left hand passage, and then I want you to play it as written, and I want you to count. Then we're going to put our hands together, and we're going to play it 4 times, counting out loud, and making sure that it's always right with fingering and everything along the way. I'm going to show them how to glue their sections together. I'm going to show them how to maybe practice in a way that connects the material effectively. I'm going to demonstrate here in a second. But what it really means is that they're going to follow carefully any existing fingerings, and Beth mentioned that she wants to make sure that they're editing fingerings along the way. That not every fingering, just because it's written down, doesn't mean it's right. We all know that everybody's hand is different. The way we approach things is different. So it's okay for students, especially intermediate and advanced students, to be changing fingering if it doesn't work for them. But they have to understand that it's a deliberate process, right? And that it's not just, well, that one didn't work, so I'm just kind of making something up. That if I'm going to put 4 instead of 3, I'm going to write that down, and I'm going to do that every single time. Right? So I'm ingraining this idea in students that we're going to make sure we're getting the right rhythm, and we're going to get the right notes, we're going to get the right fingering, and we're going to not go any faster than we can go to get it right. So I'm going to just show you a little bit. So here's a little part of a Clemenza Sonatina. So this is my little second theme here on the top of this Clemenza Sonatina. So it would just be telling my student, looking, there's a fingering up there, having them say, let's try to play the first 2 measures. To do, right? And so maybe it's just showing them that I'm going to sit down and do that 3 or 4 times with the right fingering, so that if they got stuck on something, they're going to repeat that passage a couple times, and they're going to play it very slow, 3 or 4 times, just getting that into there. Any little problem that comes up in that little passage, I'm going to show them how to focus on that little part, make sure the fingering is comfortable, work through it, and feel good about it. Then I'm going to say, let's look at the left hand, right? Learning music like this, a lot of it is about categorizing the information. So I'm going to hope that my student looks at those first 3 notes on the left hand and thinks, G major, it's a G major triad. And I'm going to enforce that in my student by making them block it. Right? And I'm going to say, look, we're going to play all those notes together. That's a G major chord. And then as we're learning it, I'm going to say, look, what happens as I go to the next chord? And I always ask these questions of my students. My bottom note is going to stay the same. What do the top 2 notes do? They both go up. Does that look familiar? Yes, we can play this chord progression 55,000 times. Right? So we can see that this goes up. And what chord is this? This is C major in 2nd inversion. And so my student has blocked it. They've got the shape. Right? Blocking teaches our hand to find groups of notes. It teaches our eyes to find groups of notes. It teaches us to categorize information. So I'm making sure my student has seen that, recognized that, and categorized it, and that the hand is finding all of the notes as a group. Then I might tell them to sit down and block the left hand while they play the right hand as written. Right? So that they're just getting the big picture. That might be as far as some students go in a week. right? And I've given them very specific directions that they've gone through and they've